the 5 trends that are shaping the future of work. All the changes that we're seeing within our organizations, all these discussions that are happening around engagement and employee experience and everything is happening because of these 5 trends. And this is where I'd like to spend the bulk or the rest of my time, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. And I'd be really curious to hear what you guys actually think and if you're seeing this within your organizations. So let's start with the first trend, which is around new behaviors. And these are new behaviors largely being shaped by social media and by the web. So what do I mean by new behaviors? Well, if I were to find you on the streets, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, and come up to you and say, you know what, one day I will know everything about you, you would probably think that I am nuts. But look at the world that we live in today. We share all of our information on sites like Twitter. We put up all of our information on Facebook. We tell people where we are on Foursquare. We put up pictures on Instagram. Our professional history is on LinkedIn. I could probably Google anybody in this room and find an enormous amount of information about you. And so what that means is we are comfortable opening up and being more public and sharing and communicating and collaborating. And these behaviors are making their way into our organizations. And the common theme that these companies are saying is, well, if it's so easy for somebody to Google something or to message someone or to get access to information or to learn something by watching a YouTube video, why is it so hard for them to do that inside of our organization? And so the organization has to change and they start to think differently about these things. So that's the first trend, new behaviors. The second trend that we're starting to see is around technology. Now, technologies are, of course, a very, very fascinating part of the future of work, especially considering that we are at Park. Now, some of the technologies we see is shift to the cloud, big data, the Internet of Things, wearable devices. I have a wearable device on my wrist. Anybody here wearing a wearable device? Okay. Wow. Okay, so it's pretty much a third or a half of the room. You know, if I were to ask that question a year ago, barely anybody would raise their hand. So we're already starting to see that wearables are making their way into our personal life and will be making their way into our organizations. So let's talk a couple minutes about these technologies and what they are and the impact that they are actually having. The first one that I'll touch on, and again, these are the ones that I'm referring to. The first one that I'll touch on is around big data. Now, this is a chart that was put together by IDC, and they project this is the amount of information or the type of growth that we're going to see up until through 2020. Now, just to give you some context around how big these numbers are, down here in 2011, we apparently produced 1.8 exabytes of data. Now, according to IDC and all these other companies, that is equivalent to creating the Great Wall of China out of 32 gig iPads filled with information at twice the height, right? That's a lot of information. And that's 2011. So it just gives you some context where we're going in the next 5 years, right? Massive amounts of data and information being produced by anything and everything. Anything that can be connected to the web will be connected to the web. And all of these things are going to produce data. Toasters, toothbrushes, cars, you name it. If it's got an on and off switch, it's going to be producing data and information. I saw somebody put an article up online where during one of the Formula One races, on average, a car puts out 1.5 gigabytes of data to a race, right? 1.5 gigabytes of data for just doing some laps around a track.
Do you want to hear something really crazy? 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed. Can you do me a favor and help me change that number by subscribing to this YouTube channel? Thank you very much.
The second thing that we're starting to see is around cloud computing. Now, cloud computing has, of course, been around for a while, but it's becoming more pervasive within organizations. And one of the big things that this means for companies is that employees get more control over the technology that they want to use. I speak with a lot of technology executives that are telling me, we give employees tools and they don't like it. So what do? They go out online, they put in their credit card information, and for $10 a month, they're using the best piece of enterprise software because they want it, not because we're giving it to them. And so employees are now able to take control over the technologies that they want and the tools that they want to use to become more productive and effective and engaged at work. The next one that we're seeing is around wearable devices. And for those of you that probably can't see it in the back, I'll go through what some of these are. But this is a question that was asked: how interested would you be in wearing or using a sensor or device, assuming it was from a brand you trust or offered a service that you were interested in? Now, this was done across the United States and across Europe. And you can see at the top, 42% of people in the United States would be comfortable wearing it on their wrists. And as you go around, you can see the comfort level for various things. Now, what's scary is some of these things tattooed on skin. Almost 10% of people in the United States would be comfortable having a sensor tattooed on their skin, provided it was from a brand that they respected and trusted. But look at this, right? It's amazing to see these numbers clipped onto clothing, earbuds, upper arm, around their chest. And these numbers are growing. They're growing. People are becoming much more comfortable using these devices. The next thing that we're seeing in the technology space is the Internet of Things. Now, this is by 2020, and there have been different numbers on this. Some of them have been exponentially larger than this. Some of them have been somewhat smaller. So I took a chart that I thought was kind of in between. But basically what this means is that by 2020, it's projected that there are going to be over 50 billion with a B connected devices. Can you imagine 50 billion connected devices? Right? That is an interesting world that we're going to be living in. And this is 5 years away. This is something that a company called Libelium put together. And if you Google Libelium Smart World, you'll be able to find this image high res and you can take a look at it at your computer. But this is an example of how a city that is constructed using the Internet of Things can start to talk to each other and what that might look like. So you can see, starting from down here, the quality of shipping conditions. That information will get sent into different parts of the city, depending on parking. Parking can get adjusted, intelligent shopping, smart lighting. You have smart roads. I've already seen several of these types of campaigns on Kickstarter start to happen. So essentially, this is what some people believe is going to be the type of world that we're going to be living in, where a city is going to be able to communicate and start to talk to itself and start to help communicate and drive things and hopefully make people and things more productive. Now, this is a little bit of a scary research, in my opinion, of what was done. And I know somebody was talking about unemployment and stuff like that. So this was done by, I believe it was The Economist and Business Insider. And they did a massive report, massive research project on this, which you can take a look at. I think if you Google by 2025 robots, automation, something like that, you'll find this report. It pops up at the front page of Google for pretty much every search. And basically what they did is they looked at what is the probability that your job is going to disappear. These are some of the jobs that they looked at, but they actually looked at far more jobs than just this. And you can see that if you're in the roles such as telemarketing, accounting, auditing, technical writers, retail salespeople, chances are that within the next 20 years, your job is going to be completely automated and completely done by a robot. So again, this is a huge concern for a lot of organizations. What does this mean for what the future of work is going to look like? Are robots really going to take away our jobs? There's a huge debate about this. And from what I've seen, it's split 50-50. Some people think that robots and automation, as it eliminates jobs, more new jobs will get created to replace them. And then other people believe that there's no way that we're going to be able to create as many new jobs as technology replaces. Unfortunately, I'm in that second camp where I think that there's just no way for us to create as many new jobs as technology replaces. But we will see. Right, we will see. This isn't that far away, so it's very, very interesting for companies to think about this. The third trend that I want to talk about is the millennial workforce. Anybody here a millennial besides me? 2, 3, 4, we're a dying breed, guys. So a couple of us in here. Yeah, exactly. So the millennial conversation is a big one for a lot of organizations. Most companies are very concerned with this generation of worker because they believe that they have new attitudes and values and expectations and ways of working. And they're digital natives that were born using these types of technologies, right? They know how to use this, and we have to change to adapt. Now, by 2020, millennials are expected to comprise 50% of the workforce. Currently, they're already the largest workforce. But by 2020, they're going to be 50% of the entire workforce. By 2025, that number is going to be 75%, right? 75%. A lot of these people don't know what it's like to sit in a cubicle or to work, drive an hour and a half to and from work, right? They just don't have that concept. What's fascinating about millennials is that this is the breakdown of what we're starting to see now. You can already see Generation Z or Generation 2020 is starting to creep up and get into the mix. Now, some of the things that people say about millennials are true, of course, right? They're digital natives. They are used to technology. They've been born with it. A lot of them do have certain different values and attitudes and expectations. But I always tell organizations, if you were to get rid of every single millennial that you had that worked there, you would still have a lot of people that care about flexible work, doing meaningful work, having a good relationship with their boss, their manager, their coworkers, their peers. So when I think of the future employee, I don't think of it as somebody that is 22 or 32 or 52. It doesn't matter how old you are. The future employee, at least in my mind, is somebody that is able to change their behaviors and mindsets to embrace a lot of these new concepts that we're talking about. The fourth big trend that we're seeing is around mobility. The best way that I can explain what we're seeing with mobility is to tell you a little bit of a story. So a couple of years ago, after I graduated, well, more than a couple of years ago, after I graduated college, I went to China for a month with a college buddy of mine. And we spent a month there. We traveled around all over China. We went to Beijing, Shanghai, all the major cities that you would expect. But we also went to some of the remote provinces in China. One of the provinces that we went to was in Yunnan. And we rented bikes. We biked out into the middle of nowhere. We got food and just biked out for hours. And we were just surrounded by rice paddy fields and mountains, completely in the middle of nowhere. It was a very beautiful sight. And so we're looking around, taking a little bit of a break. And I look, and not too far away, there's a rice paddy farmer in the middle of the field, going about doing his regular chores, whatever he's doing. And he stops, looks at us for a minute, goes back doing whatever he's doing, stops again, and then I'm just watching him. He reaches into his pocket and he takes out a smartphone, right? A smartphone. Now, we live here in the Bay Area, which many people consider to be the tech and innovation hub of the world. Here we are, thousands of miles away from the Bay Area, in the middle of nowhere, and this person has a smartphone, which means that he is able to access the same people, the same information, the same content that I am being and living here. That is what mobility is about. And if I had to explain it as kind of a theme that we're seeing, it is connect to work. To get your job done, all you need is an internet connection. You should be able to get your job done anywhere, anytime, and on any device. The fifth and final trend that I'll look at is globalization. Now, when I think of globalization, I think of living in a world where boundaries of any kind do not exist. The culture that you subscribe to, the currency that you transact in, where you live, the language that you speak, all of these things are starting to matter less and less and less. We're especially starting to see this with the freelancer economy, where people can tap into top talent anywhere in the world. In fact, the person that made this presentation, I've never met. He makes all my presentations. He makes all of my design work, all of my logos, right? And he does amazing work, better than I was able to find even looking here in the United States. So that gives me an opportunity to tap into top talent regardless of where it might be anywhere in the world. And that's something fascinating that we're starting to see. So what do we do? What do we do about all of this? Right? What do we do about these 5 trends that are shaping the future of work? How do organizations keep up? What should they be thinking about? Now, I go into much more detail in the book, but I will give you sort of the summary of what I think a lot of organizations are starting to do. And that summary is very simple. Create laboratories, not factories. So what do I mean by that? A lot of organizations were built on this mentality that organizations are pretty much like an assembly line. You show up, You do what you're told. You don't ask any questions. You don't cause any problems. You wear what we tell you to wear. You use the devices we tell you to wear, or we use the devices we tell you to use. And that's it, right? That's what it used to be like to work. It was a factory. I like to call it a disengagement factory, right? People would be enthusiastic. They'd be happy. They'd go into these organizations, and then they come out depressed and sad and unmotivated. At least most people do. So instead of creating these types of factories where information flows from the top down, where you have silos, where everybody just does what they're told, we have to create laboratories. And of course, Park would know this better than anybody. In laboratories, that's where you start to seek innovation. So creating a laboratory means listening to what your employees care about, paying attention to what they value, running experiments and running tests and seeing what sort of ideas you can get. I'll give you an example. Atlassian is a company that's based in the Bay Area, started off in Sydney. And they wanted to figure out, do people use their desks? And so they put sensors on everybody's desk to find out if people even sit there. And they find out that when most people work, they don't work at their desks. They go sit in random places, they're at meetings, they move around, they don't use their desks. And so they change their office style to be more open. They remove this idea of having dedicated desks. Right? That's what I mean when I say create an experiment. Whirlpool, another great organization. They got rid of management titles and they created 4 types of leadership categories for everybody. And they said, everybody here is a leader. These are the 4 types of leaders that we have. Leader of self, leader of function, leader of executive team, and I forgot what the 4th one was. Adobe, another great example. They recently abolished their annual employee reviews to see what would happen. Mars Drinks invested $30 million into a new facility where they wanted to create beautiful employee experiences for people to show up to work. Pandora, the music company, they have a program where if 3 or 5 employees care about something, they can petition to get funding for it, regardless of what it is. Wine club, racquetball, chess, whatever it is. If you have a group of people that care about something, the company will pay for you to do something with it. One of the other cool things that Adobe did is they created an innovation program called Kickstart. And basically what that program was is they would give any employee that wanted to participate $1,000 prepaid credit card. You don't have to show receipts. You don't have to do anything with it. They'll take you through a 2-day innovation workshop, and you use that $1,000 to create a prototype of whatever it is your idea is. Once you create that prototype, you present it to an executive. If you can just get one executive at the company to say that they like your idea, you get funding for it to do something else with it. Right? That's what I mean when I say creating a laboratory. Run these experiments, run these tests. Be open to communication, open to collaboration, and run your organization less like a hierarchy and more like a flatter type of structure. I think that's the direction that we're starting to see a lot of these organizations go to.